It's evening. And if you're watching this after 7 p.m., there's something important you need to understand before you take another bite of anything. Because what happens in the next few hours after dinner is quietly shaping your heart in ways most people never think about until it's too late. My name is Dr. William Lee. I'm a physician and researcher whose work has been supported by Harvard Medical School and the Angiogenesis Foundation. And what I'm going to share with you is something most people never hear during a routine checkup, even though it may directly influence whether you stay strong and independent in your 70s or end up facing serious cardiac problems much earlier than expected. A large European Heart Journal study followed more than 14,000 adults over the age of 50 for 12 years. The results weren't subtle. People who regularly ate certain foods in the evening, foods often seen as harmless or even healthy, showed a 67% increase in arterial stiffness. They had a 48% higher risk of atrial fibrillation, and most concerning, they were nearly twice as likely to experience a major cardiac event compared to those who avoided those same foods at night. Twice as likely, not slightly elevated, not marginally different, a real measurable doubling of risk. And here's what makes this even more unsettling. One of the foods at the top of today's list is something many doctors still recommend. It might already be sitting in your kitchen right now. You may even have had it today without realizing it could be affecting your cardiovascular system in this specific way. Before we go deeper, I want you to reflect for a moment. Think about your age right now. And more importantly, think about your evening routine. Do you eat within 2 hours of going to bed? Do you snack late at night without really considering what it's doing inside your body? These aren't casual questions. After 50, your metabolism, your hormone rhythms, and your cardiovascular system no longer behave the way they did in your 30s or 40s. That isn't a weakness, it's biology. But it does mean the rules have changed, whether anyone told you or not. Tonight, we're going to move through 5 foods ranked from concerning to the most damaging when eaten at night. And we'll start with one that surprises almost everyone. At number 5, we begin with something that doesn't usually raise alarm bells at all. Fruit juice. Not soda, not alcohol, fruit juice, orange juice, apple juice, cranberry juice, even pomegranate juice, drinks that are widely marketed as natural, vitamin-rich, and heart-friendly. But the issue isn't whether fruit itself is healthy. The issue is timing, concentration, and how your aging body processes it at night. Research from the University of Toronto examined how the liver handles fructose, the natural sugar in fruit juice, during different times of the day. The findings were striking. After about age 55, the liver's ability to process fructose drops significantly in the evening hours by as much as 40% between 7 p.m. and midnight. What does that mean in practical terms? It means that the sugar from that glass of juice isn't being efficiently used for energy. Instead, it gets converted into triglycerides and circulates in your bloodstream. You can think of triglycerides as a kind of metabolic residue, thicker, heavier fats that don't move through the system cleanly. Over time, they contribute to plaque formation and force your heart to work harder just to maintain normal circulation. And this is where age becomes critical. After 50, your mitochondria, the tiny energy factories inside your cells, begin to lose efficiency. On average, you lose about 10% of their function per decade. After 40, by your mid-60s, your body may be operating at only 70% of its previous energy capacity. Now, combine that with late night sugar intake, you have a system already producing less energy paired with a nutrient that demands rapid processing at a time when your metabolism is naturally slowing down for rest. That mismatch creates a silent strain on your cardiovascular system. You won't feel it immediately. There's no sudden warning sign, but over months and years, it contributes to arterial stiffness and metabolic stress that accumulate quietly. This is why timing matters more than most people realize. The same glass of juice in the morning can be handled relatively efficiently. At night, it becomes something very different inside an aging body. If you enjoy fruit juice, there is a safer approach. Morning consumption, ideally before 10 a.m., is when insulin sensitivity is higher and your liver is better prepared to handle sugars. Even better, whole fruit is a far superior choice. The fiber in whole fruit slows sugar absorption and changes the metabolic response entirely. And there's another simple adjustment that can make a measurable difference. Pairing fruit with healthy fats, like a small handful of walnuts, can reduce the glycemic impact significantly. Research from Loma Linda University has shown that certain fats in nuts can help buffer the cardiovascular response to natural sugars. So fruit juice isn't bad, but at night, especially after 50, it becomes something your body is less equipped to handle efficiently. And that brings us to the next food, one that is far more embedded in everyday eating habits, and one that explains a lot of the confusion people have about eating healthy while still developing cardiovascular problems over time. Now we move to number 4, and this is where things become more complicated because it challenges something many people have been told for years, that eating protein at dinner is always a good idea, especially after 50. The food in question is red meat, particularly when it's consumed in the evening meal. Before going further, it's important to be precise. Protein itself is not the problem. In fact, after 50, protein becomes even more important for maintaining muscle mass, strength, and overall metabolic health. The issue is not whether you eat protein, but what type of protein you choose, how often you eat it, and most importantly, when you eat it. A major study from the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health followed more than 37,000 adults over 8 years. It found that individuals over 55 who regularly consume red meat as their primary evening protein source 4 or more times per week had significantly higher levels of a compound called TMAO in their bloodstream. TMAO stands for trimethylamine N-oxide. And while the name sounds complex, the concept is actually quite simple. You can think of TMAO as a substance that behaves like rust inside your blood vessels. Here's how it forms. When you eat red meat, especially beef and lamb, your gut bacteria break down compounds like carnitine and choline. As a byproduct, they produce TMAO, which enters your bloodstream and begins interacting with your arterial walls. Over time, elevated TMAO levels are associated with increased inflammation and faster buildup of arterial plaque. Research from the Cleveland Clinic has linked higher TMAO levels with a 62% increased risk of major cardiovascular events. So the concern is not just digestion, it is the long-term effect this metabolic byproduct has on the structure and flexibility of your arteries. Now, timing makes this even more important. Your body is not biologically identical throughout the day. It follows a circadian rhythm, meaning different systems are more active or less active depending on the time. Inflammation, for example, naturally rises in the late evening and early night. This is a normal biological rhythm, but it becomes more pronounced with age due to declining regulation of hormones like melatonin and cortisol. Melatonin, which is best known for sleep, also plays a role in controlling inflammation. As its levels decrease with age, your body loses some of its ability to keep nighttime inflammation in check. So when you consume red meat at night, you are introducing compounds that promote inflammation into a system that is already naturally leaning toward an inflammatory state. Over time, this combination contributes to what researchers call chronic low-grade cardiovascular inflammation. It doesn't cause immediate symptoms, which is why it is often overlooked, but it is one of the key drivers behind arterial stiffening and plaque buildup in older adults. To make this more concrete, let's talk about a patient I once worked with. I'll call him Gerald. He was 71 years old, a retired school principal from Louisiana. Gerald didn't come in with a dramatic health crisis. He described something much more subtle: fatigue after dinner, mild breathlessness when climbing stairs, and a persistent heaviness in his chest that previous evaluations had dismissed as stress-related. When we reviewed his diet in detail, a pattern emerged. For over a decade, Gerald had been eating red meat almost every evening, steak, pot roast, grilled beef dishes 5 to 6 times a week, consistently at dinner. He believed he was doing the right thing. Like many people, he had been told that protein supports aging muscles, which is true, but no one had explained how the timing and source of that protein could affect his cardiovascular system. We made one key change: shifting his primary protein sources away from red meat at dinner and replacing them with fish, poultry, and plant-based proteins. Within 4 months, His inflammatory markers dropped by 34%. His energy improved. The breathlessness decreased significantly. By his 6-month follow-up, he described feeling like he had borrowed 10 years back. This is not about extremes. It is about patterns over time. If red meat is something you enjoy, the goal is not complete elimination. It is timing and moderation. Earlier in the day, your digestive and metabolic systems are more active and better equipped to handle it. Lunch is significantly safer than dinner in this context. Limiting red meat to 1 or 2 times per week and pairing it with foods rich in nitrates, such as leafy greens, can also help reduce some of the vascular stress associated with TMAO. Now, there is another group of foods that often surprises people. Before we continue, it's worth noticing a pattern that's already becoming clear. It's not just about bad foods versus good foods. It's about how the same food behaves differently depending on when you eat it, especially after 50, when your metabolism and cardiovascular system are no longer operating at full youthful speed. Now we move to number 3, and this is one of the most misunderstood categories in modern diets: flavored yogurt and sweetened dairy products eaten at night. At first glance, yogurt seems like a smart choice. It's light, it contains probiotics, and it's often marketed directly to health-conscious people, especially older adults. Many labels emphasize terms like low fat, fruit on the bottom, or heart healthy. But when you look closely at what's actually inside many of these products, a different picture appears. The issue is not plain yogurt. Plain unsweetened yogurt, especially Greek yogurt, can be genuinely beneficial. The concern is flavored, sweetened varieties that often contain large amounts of added sugar, sometimes between 20 and 29 grams per serving. To put that into perspective, that can be close to or even more than a dessert. Research from the USDA Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging at Tufts University found that adults over 60 who regularly consumed high-sugar dairy products in the evening experienced significantly higher fasting blood glucose levels the following morning. Researchers refer to this pattern as nocturnal glycemic loading. Here is what that means in simpler terms. When you eat a sugar-heavy yogurt at night, your body receives a large glucose load at a time when it is least prepared to handle it. This is because insulin sensitivity follows a natural daily rhythm, and it is lowest in the evening. Insulin is the hormone responsible for moving glucose out of the bloodstream and into cells. When insulin sensitivity is low, that process becomes inefficient. As a result, blood sugar remains elevated for longer periods. Now consider what happens while you sleep. During sleep, your body's supposed to focus on repair processes, cell regeneration, cardiovascular maintenance, inflammation control. Instead, when blood sugar is elevated at night, your system is forced to divert energy toward managing that imbalance. In other words, instead of repairing the cardiovascular system, your body is dealing with metabolic stress. This matters even more after 60 because of a condition called endothelial dysfunction. The endothelium is the thin inner lining of your blood vessels. It plays a critical role in regulating blood flow, vessel flexibility, and overall vascular health. When it is functioning properly, blood vessels can expand and contract smoothly. But repeated blood sugar spikes, especially at night, gradually damage this lining. Research from Johns Hopkins University has shown that frequent nighttime glucose spikes accelerate endothelial dysfunction by up to 45% in older adults compared to younger individuals. The reason is simple. Regeneration slows with age. After 70, endothelial cells regenerate at roughly half the rate they did in middle age. That means damage accumulates more easily and repairs more slowly. Over time, this contributes to stiffer, less responsive blood vessels, which increases cardiovascular strain. So the concern with sweetened yogurt at night is not just sugar content. It is the combination of timing, reduced insulin sensitivity, and reduced vascular repair capacity. But this does not mean yogurt needs to be avoided entirely. The key is choosing the right form and pairing it correctly. Plain Greek yogurt without added sugar is a very different food metabolically. It contains protein and beneficial fats that support satiety and blood sugar stability. When combined with the right ingredients, it can actually become supportive rather than harmful at night. For example, adding fresh berries, provides fiber and antioxidants, which slow glucose absorption. A small drizzle of raw honey can be used sparingly if sweetness is needed, but the goal is moderation, not elimination. There is also a simple but powerful addition that improves the metabolic response further: cinnamon. Research published in the Journal of the American College of Nutrition found that cinnamon can improve insulin sensitivity by up to 19% in adults over 55. This means your body can handle glucose more efficiently during the nighttime window when it is naturally less responsive. This small adjustment changes the entire impact of the meal. So the difference is not yogurt itself. It is whether you are consuming a high sugar processed version or a balanced, nutrient-dense version that works with your biology instead of against it. And this brings us to the next category, where the misunderstanding becomes even more surprising because it involves foods that are often labeled as healthy whole grains, yet behave very differently when eaten at night after 50. Number 2 is where timing and metabolism collide in a way most people never expect. Now we arrive at number 2, and this is where many people start to feel conflicted because it challenges a belief that has been repeated for years in nutrition advice, that whole grains are always a safe, heart-friendly choice. The food in question is whole wheat bread and whole grain crackers, especially when they are eaten at night as a snack or as part of a late dinner. At first, this may sound surprising. After all, whole grains are widely recommended by doctors, dietitians, and heart health guidelines. They contain fiber, they are less processed than white bread, and they are often associated with lower cholesterol levels. All of that is true, but it is incomplete because what matters just as much as what you eat is when you eat it, particularly after the age of 55 when your metabolic rhythms begin to shift more noticeably. A study from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem followed around 2,400 adults aged 55 to 78 and examined how carbohydrate timing affected cardiovascular markers. The researchers found something very specific. People who consumed grain-based carbohydrates in the evening had significantly higher arterial stiffness compared to those who consumed the same foods earlier in the day. What makes this important is that total daily calorie intake was the same across groups. The difference was timing alone. So, what is happening inside the body? To understand this, you need to consider a concept called circadian metabolic shifting. Your body runs on a biological clock. That clock controls everything from hormone release to enzyme activity. After 50, this timing system becomes less flexible, especially when it comes to carbohydrate metabolism and cardiovascular repair. One of the key changes is that the enzymes responsible for breaking down and processing glucose become less active in the evening. At the same time, hormones that influence blood pressure regulation, such as angiotensin II, become more active during nighttime hours in older adults. Angiotensin II increases vascular tension. In simple terms, it makes blood vessels tighter and raises pressure inside the cardiovascular system. Now, imagine what happens when you combine that natural nighttime increase in vascular tension with a carbohydrate-heavy snack like bread or crackers. Even though whole grains digest more slowly than refined grains, they still raise blood glucose levels. So you end up with a system that is already leaning toward higher blood pressure and reduced metabolic efficiency, being pushed further by an incoming glucose load. It is not one single factor that causes harm. It is the overlap of several small biological shifts that become more important with age. Over time, this pattern contributes to arterial stiffness, which is one of the early indicators of cardiovascular aging. To make this more concrete, let's look at a real-world example. Margaret is 73 years old, a retired teacher from Oregon. For years, she had a nightly routine that felt harmless to her. Every evening, she would have a small serving of whole grain crackers with a slice of cheese. She considered it a light, balanced snack, something she believed was actually supporting her health. Her cholesterol levels were controlled with medication, but her doctor noticed something puzzling. Despite a generally healthy lifestyle, her inflammation markers were slowly increasing over time. When we reviewed her full dietary pattern, the timing stood out. That evening snack of crackers, though seemingly innocent, was consistently occurring during a period when her body was least efficient at handling carbohydrates. We made one adjustment. Instead of grain-based snacks at night, Margaret switched to foods that were higher in fat and protein, such as avocado, with a few pumpkin seeds or a small portion of olives and cheese. Within 3 months, her C-reactive protein, a key marker of inflammation, dropped by 28%. Her doctor described it as an unexpected improvement, but from a physiological standpoint, it was entirely explainable. Her body was no longer being challenged by carbohydrate spikes at a time when her metabolic system was least prepared to handle them. This is the key point. It is not that whole grains are unhealthy. It is that they are not neutral at all times of day, especially in the evening for older adults. If you want a simple guideline, the evening is better suited for foods that are metabolically stable. That means foods higher in fat and protein, which do not require large insulin responses and do not significantly disrupt overnight cardiovascular recovery. Examples include a small handful of almonds, a few olives, or a modest portion of cheese. These options support satiety without placing additional strain on glucose regulation systems during sleep. And now we move to number 1, where timing, sodium, and cardiovascular stress come together in the most powerful and often overlooked way, and where the risk is not just about one food, but about a category that appears in countless everyday meals without most people realizing its impact. Now, we reach number 1, and this is the most important point in this entire discussion, because it is not just about a single food. It is about a pattern that affects millions of people every single night without them realizing it. The biggest risk to your heart after 50 when consumed at night is processed sodium found in packaged and ultra-processed foods. This includes canned soups, deli meats, frozen meals, packaged snacks, soy sauce heavy dishes, and even some protein bars that are marketed as healthy. Most people hear the general warning that salt is bad for the heart, but that statement is incomplete. The real issue is not just how much sodium you eat, it is when you eat it, and after 60, timing becomes far more important than most people realize. A large study from Vanderbilt University Medical Center followed more than 6,800 adults over a 10-year period. Researchers discovered something very specific. Adults over 60 who consumed the majority of their daily sodium intake in the evening had a 71% higher rate of left ventricular hypertrophy compared to those who consumed the same total sodium spread earlier in the day. Left ventricular hypertrophy means the thickening of the heart's main pumping chamber. It is one of the early structural changes that increases the risk of heart failure over time. What makes this finding so important is that the total sodium intake was not different between groups. The only difference was timing. So why does sodium become more dangerous at night? The answer lies in kidney function and circadian rhythm. Your kidneys regulate sodium balance and fluid levels in the body. But like every other system, they follow a daily rhythm. During the day, kidney function is more active and efficient. At night, that efficiency naturally declines. Research from the University of Exeter, published in Cardiovascular Research, found that after age 60, the kidney's ability to process sodium at night can decline by as much as 35% compared to daytime function. You can think of it like this. During the day, your kidneys are working at full capacity, actively filtering and removing excess sodium. At night, that system slows down significantly, almost like a factory running on reduced staff. Now imagine eating a high sodium meal at 8 p.m., something like canned soup, a frozen dinner, or a salty snack. Your body's receiving a large sodium load at the exact time when your kidneys are least able to process it efficiently. The result is sodium retention. That excess sodium draws water into your bloodstream, increasing blood volume and raising blood pressure. Your heart is then forced to pump harder against this increased pressure throughout the night, and you are completely unaware of it while you sleep. This becomes even more important when we consider something called nocturnal blood pressure dipping. In healthy younger adults, blood pressure naturally drops by about 10 to 20% during sleep. This is called the nighttime dip. and it is essential for cardiovascular recovery. However, research from the American Heart Association shows that older adults who regularly consume high sodium meals at night often lose this natural dip. Instead of blood pressure decreasing, it remains elevated throughout the night. These individuals are known as non-dippers, and this condition is strongly associated with increased risk of stroke and heart failure. Specifically, studies show a 54% higher risk of stroke and a 38% higher risk of heart failure in non-dippers compared to those with normal nighttime blood pressure patterns. The damage is not only mechanical, it is also inflammatory. High sodium intake activates immune cells in blood vessel walls called macrophages. These cells normally help protect the body, but when overactivated by excess sodium, they begin contributing to inflammation in the arteries. Research from the Max Delbruck Center in Berlin found that high sodium exposure directly accelerates inflammatory activity in vascular tissue, speeding up plaque formation. When you combine this with the fact that systemic inflammation naturally rises at night in older adults, the effect becomes even more significant. It is a double load: increased inflammation from sodium and a body already in its inflammatory peak phase.